Thank you for joining today's educational webinar with Cancer Support Community Los Angeles. I'm Abby Espinoza, the Program Coordinator at CSCLA, and I'm honored to welcome you to this week's webinar titled, What Will Be Remembered? Crafting Memories with Children in the Face of Illness. Before we begin, if this is your first time joining us, Cancer Support Community Los Angeles is a premier nonprofit organization providing vital social and emotional support to families facing cancer, including patients, caregivers, and their loved ones, all at no cost. Our programs include support groups, healthy lifestyle classes, social activities, and educational programs such as this one. If you would like to learn more about our services or watch past webinars, please visit our website at cancersupportla.org. Before I introduce today's speaker, please note that your video and microphone are automatically disabled for this webinar. Please enter questions for the speakers into the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the Zoom window. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. We may not be able to get to all your questions today, but we'll get to as many as possible. Please use the chat feature to share comments and resources with other participants or to ask questions of CSCLA. We ask you to limit chat comments to information relevant to this topic. Kim Fryar is a certified child life specialist and holds master's degrees in family studies and in counseling with a play therapy emphasis. She is the National Program Director at Wonders and Worries, overseeing the National Helpline and connecting families with support and resources for navigating parental illness or injury. Kim has worked with children, teenagers, and families impacted by cancer and other serious illnesses for over 30 years. She is passionate about helping children and teenagers understand cancer and cope in healthy ways throughout a parent's cancer journey. Katie Hart has worked as a child life specialist since 2016. She graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Family Studies and Human Development from the University of Arizona, and then earned her Master of Arts in Education with an emphasis on child life in hospitals from Mills College. She completed a child life internship at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and has worked at various hospitals throughout the country, including Valley Children's Healthcare, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and UC Davis Health, where she has experience working with patients of all ages and diagnoses. She joined the Wonders and Worries team in 2024 as the Clinical Project Coordinator, where she is passionate about helping the team implement various program initiatives, national outreach, and research endeavors. It gives me great pleasure to welcome today's speakers, Kim Fryar and Katie Hart. Welcome.
Thank you. I am going to try and share my screen now so we can dive into today's topic, but thank you for the wonderful introduction. Okay. Can everyone see? Am I good, Kim?
We can see, and I'm just going to say hi, and I'll be back shortly. But yes, it looks great, Katie.
Well, welcome, and thank you for all for tuning in today. We are excited to be here, especially to talk about this topic of what will be remembered, crafting memories with children in the face of illness. You all did such a wonderful job introducing us that I don't even have to do that part, so that is awesome. I do want to take a second, though, before I jump into talking about today's topics to say that today's presentation may make you have certain emotions that come up, which is super normal, and we recommend that you definitely take care of yourself. Step away if you need to. We also have a helpline that you are more than welcome to email. The email will be shared throughout the presentation, but just so you know ahead of time, it's helpline@wondersandworries.org if you want to talk about any of the topics that are discussed in today's presentation, or if you like any individualized support for you and your family, that is available to you as a resource. And we're super glad that you're tuning in, and welcome. So I do want to take just a minute or so to talk about us and who we are at Wonders and Worries, especially if this is your first time ever interacting with us or hearing about us as an organization. We are a nonprofit organization, and we are especially unique, I think, because we are a team of child life specialists that work towards helping children of adults diagnosed with an illness or injury navigate and cope with everything that is involved in that experience. And child life specialists specifically are especially qualified to support families navigating illness, as we have the education and training and experience typically focused on providing that coping support to families coping with illness, trauma, and grief. And so we're especially excited to talk to you today about legacy and this concept of legacy and memory making, as it's definitely a topic that we get consulted on quite often. So for today's presentation, some of the things that we'll talk about are definitely going to be the differences between legacy and memory making. I find oftentimes people hear those two terms intertwined, so we're just going to define them for the purpose of today's presentation. And then we're going to talk about having those honest and ongoing conversations with your children. And then the part you all are probably really wanting to hear, the activities for the various ages that will promote these concepts. So I'm going to just start the whole presentation with defining the difference between legacy building and memory making. Oftentimes when we have families that consult us for these topics, they hear these two terms intertwined, and they can be used interchangeably sometimes. But for the purpose of today's presentation, I do want to highlight that when we're talking about legacy building specifically, we're talking about those intentional activities that are, or projects that are going to help families create that lasting representation of someone's identity, values, life story. When I think legacy building, I'm usually thinking in terms of that future-oriented mindset. So thinking of what is going to be left of me as a person once I'm gone. Whereas memory making is the idea of having those shared experiences or items that preserve those special moments. So thinking in terms more in the present. So definitely thinking in the moment type of activities and interventions and things like that. That's like the best way I can describe that. The other point that Kim and I wanted to highlight when we were talking about giving today's presentation specifically is there are lots of benefits that we have when we have these honest and ongoing conversations, whether it's about your illness, whether it's about legacy specifically. In the US specifically, legacy seems to be a very taboo topic. It can feel especially overwhelming to think about, let alone talk about. But we know that children benefit from that therapeutic space to ask questions. So this question on the screen, do I really need to tell them what is happening? I don't want to scare them. This is probably the most asked question I have received throughout my entire time as a child life specialist. And I want to point out that this question is such a good one because the intention behind these types of questions are always so good. As parents, we want to protect our children. We want to make sure we are giving them everything we can, right, to help them just complete their developmental trajectory. So I always value when a family comes up to me and asks this question, whether it's about their illness, whether it's about this concept of legacy. But I also usually remind families that children pick up on a lot. And so if we don't provide that space to have these conversations about all of these different life experiences, they are kind of filling in the gaps with what they're coming up with on their own, what they're hearing, and in especially social media days, things like that. So this is just a really important concept that we wanted to highlight today when talking with you all about this idea of legacy. We also want to point out that research has shown that families that participate in these legacy building type activities and legacy conversations They are more likely to have children that have improved parent-child communication. So, especially when we're talking about things like communicating about life values, legacy in general, or the illness in question, as well as children also exhibit improved emotional expression and increased feelings of validation and connection to their family. So, something to think about as well as we're talking about these concepts today. Another part that I wanted to highlight in today's presentation is just kind of our general advice with families who are navigating illness. We always recommend, and I'm sure this is not the first time you are hearing this, or probably many of these concepts, but being honest with your children about what's happening is huge and very impactful for their development and their coping. Something I always like to highlight with families when we're talking about illness and legacy is that these concepts are fairly large to process for most children. And so it's really common for maybe you to have discussed something a couple weeks ago, and then all of a sudden your child comes home from soccer practice and is asking you a question that may, for you, feel out of left field, but for them, they're still processing all of those things. And so providing that space to have that repetition is also huge for them because it's going to allow them to just revisit certain concepts and understand them better. And that's really important when we're talking about something like a legacy. Um, the other thing I think is really important when we're talking about these things is they're going to have questions, right? Encourage them to ask questions. And even better, we can try and find the answers to those questions. But it's not that you have the answers to the questions that I think is important. Saying that you don't know is so impactful for your children. And I feel like, again, as we think about interactions with our children, we want to be the ones, right, that like have all of the knowledge and are able to tell them everything that is true, right? But sometimes it's really important for your children to see that maybe you don't know the answer to something, but here's the way that we'll find the answer to that. Or maybe you don't have a way to find the answer to it, but you're figuring out a way to cope with that answer. Those are all things that we can help model for our children that are also going to be super impactful for them as they develop and grow. Um, the other thing I want to point out before we get into the topics today is the goal of us discussing these activities and interactions around legacy and memory making isn't necessarily to tell you that you need to have this space where we're doing that activity and you're talking about the memory making or legacy, right? Sometimes this is a conversation that's had as a family, and that is up to you and kind of your family and what works best for your family. But sometimes the other way to go about this is to complete the activity and not necessarily be pointing out that it's a legacy building moment or things like that. You yourself know that and are kind of being more mindful of it. But again, it's not necessarily the goal to be talking specifically about it during each interaction if that's something that is not feasible or something that will fit into your family dynamic. So, the other thing that I wanted to highlight specifically for today, especially when just again thinking about these concepts of legacy and memory making can sometimes feel overwhelming. I know that when I first started working in the hospital, it felt very overwhelming during certain moments to think of, okay, well, how do I make this such a grand activity or a grand moment for this family? And the longer I've worked in this field and just been able to be on more journeys with families, there's a beauty to these everyday memory making moments. And honestly, I feel like most families I talk to do some form of something usually in this list throughout their year that we don't even realize that we're doing it. And I think that that in itself is special. But this is something that you can do every day, this idea of memory making. And we don't want you to think that after listening to this that you need to go out and maybe complete that handful of art activities or interventions. And we will definitely have so many ideas for you if that is why you're tuning in today. But I also want to point out that, we can create those lasting memories for our children and leave our legacy of how we make them feel every day, how we make them feel supported, how we connected with them. And there's some really simple ways to do that. So, memory notes is something that our team had discussed with a lot of families, actually. So, this idea came to us as a family had pieces of art that their child was bringing home, and the mom would write notes on the back. And rather than notes about the art piece, she would actually write in notes about, uh, from her perspective, how she viewed her child. So maybe the child came home and she was really proud of the fact that they were able to present this piece of art. Or I've worked with a father who had a son who is very into American literature and got like 100% on their American literature essay. And so on the back, he was writing how proud he was, things like that, where it's from the parent's perspective of, your child in that moment, in that time. And that's really cool for your children to go back later and look at and see, oh, wow, this is what my mom or my dad thought when I brought this home. The stirring up memories in the kitchen and beyond is this idea of remembering in daily activities. So, for many people, especially in the Christmas season, you may be the family that is making tamales in your kitchen. Maybe that is something that your great grandmother had the recipe for, and now you've passed it on throughout generations. It's bringing up that conversation of talking about all of those people before, right, who had this same recipe that you're making and doing it that way. I've also had families that are picking up or going to their children's soccer practice. And maybe back in the day, you were the goalie for the soccer team at your high school, and now you're watching your child do that, connecting in those moments of maybe a funny memory that you had. But again, offering that moment for connection. This concept of snapshots in time is kind of like there's multiple apps, I'm sure, for this, but kind of the concept of like that 1 second a day. But this could be totally flexible to kind of what fits you and what you want to do and your family. This is a great way for other people to help you, especially for, I'm sure, some of the families tuning in that maybe it's harder for you to ask for that help, but ask your family maybe for a photo of your child, maybe if they're the ones helping you take them to school or to soccer practice or whatever it is. But collecting whatever photos, videos, music pieces, anything in a span of time, and then putting it all together and kind of having that to look back on is a really cool way, especially if it's kind of in your perspective and through your eyes. This concept of car talk is something that I feel like a lot of families that I work with will naturally just tell me that they're doing. So again, a lot of times people are naturally doing many of these things, but it's pretty much what it sounds like. So you're talking about memories in your child's day, and I always like to highlight that rather than giving the typical question of, oh, how was school? How was your day? Where your children are just going to be very much like, oh, it was fine. It was good. Ask them some different questions each day. It could be, what was something that was super unexpected that happened today? Or what was something that felt really awesome today that happened at school that I wasn't there for? And you're giving your child the mic, so to speak, and the space to talk about it, but you're also connecting with them during that time that you weren't maybe physically there. So thinking more in terms of those thoughtful questions that are going to prompt more of a discussion. And then finally, our last everyday memory making idea is that connection ritual. And this could look like so many things for your family. For my family, it's story time. It's reading a book to my daughter before she goes to bed. It could happen every day. Sometimes it doesn't happen every day. Sometimes this happens once a week, but that's kind of like my connection piece. I've had families who will do maybe like a dinner. Maybe it's music together. Maybe you're really into music and you have like a band day. But whatever it is, you're again making that space to connect, and that's the whole point. So I am going to now pass it off to Kim, who's going to dive into more of our activities that promote memory making and legacy building.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm excited to dive into these activities and go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll start with the first one. So, this first activity is really a great way to kick off this whole idea of let's, as a family, maybe focus more mindfully. I'll use that term throughout because, as Katie was talking about legacy building and memory making, it really is about being mindful and in the moment and then capturing these things. So this can be a wonderful way to just kind of kick this off as a family and talk about how you might want to be more mindful as a parent of doing these things, and let's embrace it as a family and start to have conversations around it. So this book, The Adventure Jar, you may or may not be familiar with. It is available for free. There's an book available. The link is right there. You can download it. You can also request a hard copy. What I love about this story, it was written by a mom with metastatic breast cancer, but it applies to any cancer journey and really focuses on embracing those good days. And they use this phrase, make it a habit to look for magic. But the idea with the adventure jar is for the family to come together and write down things that they'd love to do, simple things. It doesn't have to require a lot of money or planning. It could be going to the park. It could be having a movie night. It could be, doing something outdoors, having an outdoor picnic. But writing down things that they might like to do on a good day and putting those things in the jar. And then when there are good days, where the family can embrace, pulling something from the jar and see if that's something that your family can do in that moment. The added piece when we think about memory making is then capture. You see the dad here with the camera, and they talk about this in the book. Capturing a photo, being mindful about doing something with that memory. That might be creating a scrapbook. It might just be jotting down a note or just having that picture, but starting to think about how can I capture this moment in time and build on that. The other thing I want to mention, because it just really ties back to what Katie was talking about with these conversations, these open and honest conversations, it may naturally come up where this is a time where your child would say, well, but why can't we do this any day that we want to? And then it's, well, remember when we talked about my cancer treatment, and there's some days with my cancer treatment where I feel really tired, and that's not a day where we could do this particular activity, but we could still do this other thing. So this all weaves together in terms of conversations, embracing a moment, and then kind of capturing that moment to be referenced later, as a past memory. Okay, let's go to the next one. So, with each of these activities, I want to highlight maybe a simpler way you might be able to embrace it, and then something a little more intricate. The goal is never to overload you. Please just, as you're listening to these different activities, just hone in on the ones that maybe you're like, yeah, I'd like to think about that one some more. And pick one or two that you're like, this is an interest for me. And then share with your family and have them let you know what's an interest for them. So a memory box. A memory box can be a wonderful thing. It doesn't have to be a box. It could be a jar, it could be a bag, it could be a bowl, but just a place to hold items. And it could be very simple in terms of just a memory box for one occasion. So maybe you went to the zoo and your child, was collecting some trinkets from that day, and you were, wanting to write down some of your thoughts about that day. And so as a family, you decide, let's create a memory box to capture this day. We want to remember these things. Or it could be much more involved where maybe it's over time or over the span of a season, maybe during this holiday season. You're like, we want to capture holiday season, from the year 2025, and let's create a whole box. It could also just be around one person, or it could be around your whole family. So there's lots of different ways you can think about using this concept of creating a memory box. The next activity is jewelry making, but I want to say from the very beginning, if your family is not a jewelry family, or maybe you have members of your family who are like, yeah, I have no interest in a bracelet or a necklace, all of these ideas could be modified as a keychain. So that may be something, or maybe it's more like a lanyard. So maybe it's not a necklace that somebody wears, but something that they hang, around a rear view mirror in a car or just a mirror in a bathroom. Um, a simple way to do this is just, string, memory bracelets, friendship bracelets, and include your children. And, teenagers love this, school age children love this. Even little ones can get involved, little toddlers and preschoolers with picking beads or picking colors for creating different bracelets. And the really cool thing about jewelry making is you can do this as a family and celebrate your family as a whole in this collaborative experience, but you can also make it very unique. So, like looking at the picture of the different necklaces with the different hearts, each person in their family can focus on their favorite color. You could use, we're going to talk about fingerprints and thumbprints, but you could use thumbprints. So that's unique to each person. So it really can become that person in the family's unique piece while together you're engaging in this activity. And then capturing, a photo of when you're doing this time together. One thing I didn't mention with the necklaces is you can use air dried clay. Model Magic or just air dried clay can be a really simple material that you can use, and then you could color with permanent markers or use paints. So just thinking about what you already have available to your family, what might be simple and easy. And then on the more intricate level, there are a number of companies out there that you could send in a photo and they'll create jewelry pieces, or you can send in fingerprints. There's all sorts of different ways that you could make it something a little more, you know, intricate, kind of special, could require some more resources around it. Okay, so then the next activity I want to talk about are handprints and fingerprints or thumbprints. This is one of our very favorite activities at Wonders and Worries. We will regularly guide families through a family session where they're creating a family handprint canvas. Um, but it can be done with simply tracing hands with markers and paper. It doesn't have to be fancy art materials. It doesn't have to be a fancy art canvas or paint. And what's wonderful is it can be any age. So infants all the way through, the oldest living person in your family could participate. And all of the pictures that you're seeing are handprints, but you can also just do fingerprints. And so one of our child life specialists on our team shared one of her favorite things to do is use air dried clay and actually create a heart and then put fingerprints in the heart. Or you could draw a heart and put fingerprints in the heart. So lots of ways to capture these handprints. And it's a snapshot in time, right? It's capturing this memory, this moment in time when everyone was at this certain age and stage in life, which can be so special. And going back to what Katie was talking about with the memory notes, I highly encourage, if you think of it, to then write on the back of that picture, just what you were thinking and feeling in that moment, sharing a funny story about something silly that might have happened when you were creating the canvas as a family. Because little children may not remember those details, or different family members are going to remember different things about that moment in time. So then the next activity kind of ties in, but is, might be something that appeals more to you and to your family to do more of a 3D model. What's really cool about these 3D hand molds is the detail and how special they can be to display and how intricate they can be. And it can really capture, a smaller hand with a larger hand. And again, that moment in time. And a simple way to do this is using air dry clay, and then you can paint or use permanent marker. You can use Play-Doh tools, Or you can order casting kits off of Amazon, and they step you through these casting kits, step you through how to create a 3D mold. And they really can last a long time. You can polyurethane them to last longer. You can turn something into an ornament, maybe. And then I didn't mention feet as an option, but this little picture of the footprints, the side-by-side footprints, is another thing to consider. I also want to take a moment to mention here that with these kinds of materials, this is a perfect opportunity if you've had someone say, what could I do to support your family during this time? You could say, you know what, we'd really like to have time creating as a family doing this activity. Would you be able to order these materials for us or gather materials together for us? That can be a wonderful gift to that person, giving them that opportunity to support your family in a really specific way. So the next activity, this is honestly one of my favorites because it's so simple, but it can be very, very beneficial. And I especially love this. I love it for all ages, but I especially love it for teenagers. And maybe that's because I have worked with teenagers who have found this to be very beneficial, kind of in the future, as a way to connect with their parent later in life. So the idea is to capture lists of favorite things. Each person can have their list. You can come together as a family and say, oh, let's talk about what are our favorite foods? What's our favorite color? What are our favorite movies, our favorite books, our favorite bands, our favorite music? Um, but when you do this, you're connecting, obviously, and you're identifying things that you have in common. You're also identifying uniquenesses and sharing and feeling, kind of maybe opening someone's eyes to, oh, wow, I didn't realize that my dad loves jazz and this is his favorite band. And now if I listen to that band or I hear jazz music, I feel a connection to my dad, whether he's right here with me or not. Um, the way that I've seen teenagers use this later and kind of thinking about that legacy piece, if a parent isn't there later in life, I've had a teenager who, on special days after her mom died, on those special days, her mom's birthday, Mother's Day, just any day where she wanted to feel close to her mom, she would pull out this list and she'd eat a food that was one of her mom's favorites. She'd watch a movie that was one of her mom's favorites. She'd put on music that was her mom's favorite. She'd go through a year, she identified books, and she's like, this year I'm going to read these books that were my mom's favorites that I haven't read before. So it's an example of where making a memory could then later become kind of that legacy, that identity of a person that lives on beyond that person's lifetime. The other thing I'll mention here, which I haven't mentioned before, which I'm sure you all are already thinking about, creative ways that you could do any of these things digitally. So this could all be digital with my favorite things. Even the handprints and the thumbprints, you might create that on paper, but then you could have a digital copy of it. You could actually use a family handprint as a way to add to maybe thank you notes that you send out or holiday notes that you send out to people that you want to connect with. And you've got your family thumbprints or handprints as a part of that note that you're sharing with others. So then the next idea that I want to talk about is this idea of seasonal bucket lists. And so one of our other coworkers, which you're probably getting this idea that these are ideas that have been shared by many child life specialists, by many of our families over time that we just are excited to share with you. And we know that you have many of your own ideas, and we always want you to make this your own. So the idea of a seasonal bucket list is thinking about a certain period in time. So it could be the holiday season right now. It could be starting in the new year, in January 2026, things that maybe we want to accomplish this year. I had a colleague who, for the summer break from school, she and her, she had a middle schooler and an elementary schooler, and they did their summer bucket list. And so your whole family should participate in creating the list. And the idea isn't that you would do everything on the list, but it's really being intentional about what are some of the things that we hope to do. Could be very simple things. I want to have a great popsicle, you know, at the park. It could be something simple, it could be maybe something a little more involved, but you're capturing all those ideas and then you're posting them and you're being mindful about let's try to do these things. Kind of similar to the adventure jar, just maybe a little bit of a twist, and you're identifying a real specific period of time. Again, this could be done digitally. It could be done very simply, just using markers and crowns. It could be done on a refrigerator, where it's, on a piece of butcher paper or something like that. Um, but have fun with it and get creative around it. And then, of course, we want to spend some time thinking about the holidays. And I want to take a moment to go back to when Katie was talking about the definition of legacy building and memory making, because an example came up recently with a family that I was talking with that really helped me think about the difference. And not that the difference is something that you need to specifically focus on, but it might help you, especially at times where you're feeling strong emotion around any of this. And it is very normal and very common for families when a parent is dealing with a serious illness, a cancer diagnosis at any stage or phase of a cancer journey, for you to have stronger emotion when you're thinking about, oh, let's capture a memory, or let's think about a time in the future where maybe I'm not there. So, the example I wanted to share, we were talking about prioritizing around the holiday time. And this was a family that celebrates Christmas that I was working with. And I was helping them think about, because their energy, of course, was limited, which I imagine is happening for all of you, where maybe all of the things that you've done before as a family during this time, you're not going to be able to do all of them. So you're trying to prioritize what's most important to our family. And so for this family, they were saying that decorating the tree was the most important piece, but actually putting the tree up or putting the lights on the tree were not as important, or going to get the tree. So they could enlist helpers to basically kind of have the tree ready for them. And their priority would be coming together as a family to decorate the tree. And that's where they wanted to kind of capture that memory. So the memory making is that present in the moment. We're going to decorate the tree and we like to have this music on and we like to divide out the ornaments. And this is kind of our tradition around that. Um, the legacy building piece of that is thinking about, is there anything that I want my children to be aware of in the future if I'm not there? It's, that forward thinking of what do I want them to know about my family traditions or about traditions that matter to me or my values or my beliefs if I'm not here to share that with them. And so we were talking about that with this particular family and really helping parents think about their priorities around all of these different pieces. Um, so wanted to share that because it might help you. And the other piece I want to say, and then I'll focus on the slide a little bit more, um, this concept of when we have our own strong emotions, kind of this response, it's a grief response. It's a loss because of what we're dealing with the illness and the treatment journey, the loss of the things that we might normally have been doing. There's a grief response that can go along with that. And sometimes that can stop us from moving forward with kind of the memory making piece. And just remind yourself that having a grief response and creating a happy memory can happen at the same time. We can feel that grief and we can feel that joy, and those can coexist. And it's going to be unique for each person in the family. And most often, our children are feeling the joy. They're feeling the memory making in the moment. And then it's later, maybe, that they even realize, oh, that's a memory that I created, or this is kind of a shared value that my parent wanted to, instill in me. So the slide in thinking about traditions, and it could be this holiday season if you celebrate Hanukkah or if you celebrate Christmas or any other holiday around this season. How can you focus in on traditions that are most important to you and most important to your children? How can you build on existing traditions? And maybe you just add a whole new tradition that makes sense for this particular holiday season. And as you go forward with other holidays that come up, the picture under the tree is from Dia de los Muertos, where someone was creating an ofrenda, which, is kind of a shrine to people that have been lost and remembering those people. And for some who participate in this tradition, there's real importance around the foods that are made and displayed, and specific trinkets that might be displayed, and the photos that might be displayed. So, really working together as a family to determine what's most important, what's most meaningful, and what would you want to spend your energy on. And then the last activity I want to mention is this memory fidget activity. So this is an activity that you can create where a child can put in their hands. It's like a sensory experience where they have beads with different, each bead could represent a memory. So as you're creating these memory fidgets as a family, you're selecting beads that remind you of maybe that time that you all went swimming, or when you went to the park, or maybe this is this person's favorite color and they want to put that bead on their memory fidget. And the idea is that they can move those beads, have this like handheld fidget and feel a connection to those memories and to your family as a whole, or to an individual if they want to create a memory fidget for a specific person in their life. So now I want to shift to a couple ideas around books, and I have a few I'll share, then I'll pass it back to Katie. It can be really beneficial to utilize books. We started with the adventure jar, but to have a story that maybe you read together as a family, or maybe you just read it yourself and it gives you ideas for other activities that you might do. So the first one I want to focus on is the book Badger's Parting Gifts. And what I love about this story, and there's a read aloud version there, a link there that you could just listen to. This is a story about Badger and his friends, his forest friends, and the things that Badger taught each of them. He taught one of them how to ice skate, and another how to create a paper chain. And so in the story, Badger dies, and after Badger's death, the friends are remembering the things that Badger taught them. And this is their connection to Badger and with Badger, and how they choose to kind of honor him, honor his memory, and honor those unique things about him. It's that legacy of, maybe I'm going to bake these cookies that Badger taught me to bake, and I'm going to continue on with a tradition that Badger and I used to have together, and I'm going to share it with others. So it can be really a beautiful way to think about those traditions that you might want to share, or that you've already shared with your children. And then the other book I want to mention, it really ties into some of the activities I've already talked about. It's called The Memory String. And, it could be a similar way to do like the jewelry making that we mentioned, or a memory box. But this book talks specifically about this little girl's connection to her mom. Her mom has died in the story, and her mom had collected buttons from different items of clothing over the years. And each button, so there might be a button from a graduation dress that was worn, or a button from a uniform from her grandfather, or a button from a wedding dress, a button from any kind of special event or a special day. And so this little girl was connecting through this memory string and then thinking about how she might add to it. So it's a lot we went through. Thanks for bearing with me. Let me pass it back to Katie.
All right. Thank you, Kim. That was a lot of good information. So the next kind of story that I wanted to highlight, and idea or slash activity I wanted to highlight was this idea of recording memories. So This came about when we have had some families that have talked about having even like extended hospitalizations and wanting to keep that connection with their children, but also recognizing, right, that during a period of illness and everything that goes into navigating that illness, your routine and your sometimes plans, everything kind of can be discombobulated. So this family had such a great idea. They had a younger child, so probably more like preschool age, but you could probably modify this to fit so many different ages and family dynamics. But they love to read The Kissing Hand, especially if this child went to daycare, any period of separation, and we're used to having both parents there to read this book. And so they found a bear that you could record, and these are available on all sorts of websites and things that you can find these stuffed animal bears or different stuffed animals that you can record on. And they recorded her voice reading through The Kissing Hand, and then the father, the grandparent, whoever was watching her that night would kind of help facilitate it. So it was still connecting everyone. And then sometimes she would also call in and FaceTime. But I love the idea of it could be a story. It could be, again, if your family is musically inclined, it could be a piece of music, something that is just going to capture that beautiful memory that you are intentional about, but then also something to think about if you're not there in that moment, what is something that they can use to help reinforce that memory as well. Um, Another wonderful way to incorporate an activity around books is this idea of joint journaling. I love this idea because this is a great way to get everyone's perspective in the family about certain things. So for this, you will need just a journal, or it could even be some printer paper that you are okay writing some prompts on. It could be something you create on Canva, some different colored markers. And what I encourage families to do is to think about certain prompts. So, some of our favorite ones that we like to tell families about is what is one of the happiest moments in your life. So, maybe that's a prompt, and each person in the family has a different colored response. So, maybe mom is purple, dad is pink. Brother is orange, and you kind of go through and you write out your responses and then can share them. That's a wonderful way to do this and to get a conversation going about kind of who you are as a family in that moment in time. Some other great prompts that we have are tell me about a time you felt proud. This is a huge one too for your children usually to hear. I think that's not talked about enough, but telling our children that we're proud of them for certain things will help them a lot later in life. If you could be any age at all, what age would you be and why? I just think that this one has been fun to hear responses, especially if you have little ones. And then if you could have a superpower, what would it be? Those are kind of our most popular prompts. But this is a wonderful activity to kind of, again, navigate that conversation as a family on different family values and ideals. And then the last piece about book recommendations, these are just a couple of memory making ideas that you can and explore a little bit further. So these are wonderful if you are at the end of this webinar and thinking, huh, I wish I could dive a little bit deeper into some more of these topics. These are two wonderful books that will help you with that. And then I know we are getting close to time, but I do want to highlight we have so many other resources available that I would just like to highlight real quick before we kind of tie things up. The first one is we do have various Wonder Chats, is what we call them at Wonders and Worries. So these are webinars that we will facilitate much like today, and then we actually have them recorded and on our webpage. So this one in particular about having difficult conversations with your children has been very popular, especially on these platforms talking to parents. I think we highlight a lot of important topics and conversations in this webinar, but we have a whole list of them and are continuously updating them. So we try and release them every few months with new topics. So if that's something you're interested in, please check out our Wonder Chat webinars. We also are open if you're curious about maybe a topic that we haven't covered, please send us an email and we would love to make that happen for you and have a space for that. The other resource I wanted to highlight, just because I didn't know about this until probably about maybe it was last year, but Inheritance of Hope is an organization and they do many wonderful things. But I will say, especially as a child life specialist now for many years, and Kim, I'm sure, can also speak to this, I was thrilled to find out that they have this option of creating they call it a legacy video. And it's completely free, no cost to you, but they will help you and your family essentially capture a video, and it can look like so many creative things because each family is unique and there are so many different dynamics to that. But this is definitely something if you are interested and intrigued by the idea of creating a family video, I would highly encourage you to check out their webpage. And then I do want to highlight, I talked about this earlier on in our presentation, but we do have a helpline, and this is our information. So if you have any questions or things like that, this is a great place to send an email, give us a call. We offer services free to families, especially families that maybe are curious about how maybe Wonders and Worries can help you a little bit further. This is a great place to start and a great resource. And then on top of that, we also have some apps. So we have the Wonders and Worries to Go apps for parents, and they cover lots of different topics, things like child development, different family resources, things like that. So these are also great to check out if you have time. And other than that, I think we are finished. I do think we were going to open it up to, if there were questions. This is our contact information. Please feel free to uh, take our emails down, send us some notes if you have any questions, things like that. Kim and myself are more than happy to help.
Thank you so much, Kim and Katie. We really truly enjoyed you being here, and thank you for sharing all of this wonderful information. We did receive a couple questions during registration, so I can start with one of those. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. But someone asked, how can I help a child who hasn't been told much about their parent's illness? I'm assuming this might be like a caregiver and not an actual parent.
So I would say I love that Katie just highlighted that difficult conversations webinar. I think that is a perfect place to start. If just, going through that, sharing that with any of the parents or caregivers who are kind of thinking about how much to share and when to share and how to start to have those conversations. It's a very important question and a very individualized question, right? Like we always recommend having conversations and being honest, but doing that within the scope of your family and trusting your instincts as a parent. And so without having all the specifics for, who's asking this question and kind of what the details are, I think taking a look at that webinar and then reaching out to us to think further about how can we best support you in that journey. And what's wonderful about what we were just talking about with the memory making and legacy building is you can do all of these things that we were talking about with just whatever information has been shared so far with your children. And oftentimes in doing some of these activities, some of their questions will come up because you're kind of opening the door for communicating in new ways. And that can be kind of a guide to what is on the minds of my children.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then another question we received was, what are steps you recommend a parent take for their children in case they don't live as long as they hope to? I know you guys covered a number of activities you can do, but are there any steps that you recommend parents take?
I think this is such a wonderful question too. I just think for everyone, all the parents that we work with, all the families I actually interact with, even just throughout my day, because we don't know what's guaranteed, right? Like we don't know tomorrow. So that slide I was talking about with those like everyday memory making, those are pieces that I always encourage families to think about just in general. So I think there is something really great about the fact that those are so accessible and something that you can do. I also think, when you're navigating an illness, right, and your whole world has been flipped upside down, there is some sense of control that I feel like I've had families talk about when they're able to intentionally do some of those things. And not only do they feel like, okay, I am intentionally doing this and helping my child feel a certain way, or showing my child how to cope a certain way that they will again use throughout their lifetime, which is a huge legacy. But I think also a sense of, okay, like I don't have a lot of control over a lot of other things that are happening, but when my child is coming home from dance practice and we're in the car, I have 20 minutes of her attention, I'm gonna, try and make that connection happen. And it probably sounds really small, but I promise you that those little moments add up. And that's what we all remember about each other.
And Katie, that's so beneficial. And thank you for sharing that. And what a great question. And the other piece that comes to mind that we haven't really talked about today, but it really is talking about the support system, talking about this along the way, and thinking about even like this holiday time, like kind of identifying who are these other people that maybe we don't see every day, but that are really important to our family and that are here to support us, and then it is those people that are here every day to support us. And so having these conversations about, it could be just, I might not be able to pick you up from school because I took longer at the doctor's office than I expected. And so here's our plan. If I can't pick you up from school, this person can pick you up from school. Here's kind of our support plan. But it's also, if I'm not here, you know, if I were to die, if another person that we love were to die, these are the other people that are here to support you, that are here to take care of you, which is that core fear for any child is, will I be cared for, and how will I be cared for, and how will my needs be met? So that's that core feeling. And then it's that connection feeling. How will I stay connected to this person that I love so much and who loves me so much? And so it can be a really difficult thing, just emotionally for us as adults to kind of put it out there and say, let's talk about this. But it is so beneficial. And if you can kind of push through and hopefully use some of these ideas that we shared today as a way to just, let's open up these conversations and focus on it as a family. As Katie mentioned, the research absolutely shows, and we see every day, that children can cope and thrive through a parent's serious illness and beyond their death, if that's what happens, for a family.
Thank you both so much. I really truly appreciate you being here. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time together, and I'd like to thank you both once again. We do have one final closing slide. Kathy, if you want to go ahead and share that. Perfect. Thank you. So if you would like to learn more about Cancer Support Community Los Angeles, please visit our website at cancersupportla.org. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at info@cancersupportla.org. Kim and Katie have also graciously agreed to share a copy of their slides. So if you would like to request a copy, please feel free to email us as well. And now I am going to hand it over to our clinical supervisor and youth program manager, Jennifer Comiskey, who will share some more information about our child, teen, and family program.
Thanks, Abby, and thank you so much again to Kim and Katie for a fantastic presentation. Before we close, I just want to share a little bit about CSCLA's Child, Teen, and Family program. Our program supports the whole family, whether it's children living with cancer or youth with a parent, sibling, or loved one facing cancer, or children who are bereaved. We provide a safe and welcoming space where children and teens can connect with others who really understand what they're going through, learn valuable coping skills, and importantly, have fun. Our programs include monthly social events, educational workshops like this one, groups for kids, teens, and parents, and counseling services, all at no cost. So for more information, you can visit our website, which is listed there on that slide, or contact us at the info account email listed on the slide. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you all at a future webinar.